And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, March 28th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are some of the news stories from the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Excuse me. The Navajo Nation broke ground last week on a $150 million casino project along Interstate 40 east of Flagstaff, Arizona. The first phase of construction in the Twin Arrows Casino is set to begin next month. Tribal officials have planned a July 1st, 2012 opening. The casino is the tribe's first in Arizona. Plans call for a hotel, conference center, spa, and golf course at the site. Navajo President Ben Shelley says tribal officials will hold a job fair to fill the positions. The tribe has a Navajo preference in employment. The tribe opened its first casino east of Gallup, New Mexico in the year 2008. The highest-ranking Bureau of Indian Affairs officer on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation is facing federal corruption charges related to thefts from the tribe's loan program. A federal indictment filed and unsealed last week charges 63-year-old Superintendent Florence White Eagle of Poplar, Montana, with 6 felonies, including theft from an Indian tribal organization, bribery, and concealment of public corruption. Prosecutors said she took part in a scheme in which more than $1 million was embezzled from a program intended to help tribal members with short and long-term loans. Court records say the scheme ran from 1999 to 2009. The Billings Gazette reports White Eagle has not been arrested but must appear for arraignment on March 29th. Indian Health Service officials say they've seen an increase in the number of new HIV cases on the Navajo Nation. About 15 new cases were diagnosed at Navajo-area facilities in the year 2000. That number stood at 40 for 2009 and 35 last year. Infectious disease specialist Jonathan Arella says he's hopeful that screening, outreach efforts, and an expansion of clinical services will help increase awareness of risk factors and prevent the spread of HIV. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the overall rate of HIV and AIDS diagnosis for American Indians and Alaska Natives has been higher than that of whites, but generally lower than blacks and Hispanics. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. The federal agency that oversees Indian gambling has told Alabama Attorney General that electronic bingo is allowed on Creek Indian land because the paper bingo is legal in the state. The National Indian Gaming Commission sent a letter to Attorney General Luther Strange saying Indian tribes are not bound by the state's definition of bingo. The letter was in response to the Attorney General's request for the commission to bar the electronic games from 3 Indian casinos. They have been the only electronic bingo casinos operating in Alabama since privately operated casinos closed under pressure from the governor's gambling task force last year. Horsemen from the Crow tribe in Montana gathered about 700 horses belonging to a man charged with animal cruelty after the animals were found wandering tribal lands and nearby ranches without adequate water and food. Crow tribal vice chairman Calvin Jefferson tells the Billings Gazette that last week's roundup went smoothly. The Bureau of Indian Affairs condemned the horses on March 1st because they were trespassing on tribal lands. The BIA contracted with the tribe to round up the horses and feed them until they were to be sold in late March or early April. BIA Regional Director Ed Parazian said the owner, James Leachman, has 5 days to redeem his horses if he can pay for the cost of their care and roundup and the damage they caused to rangeland. Nearly 2 years ago, Donella Miller began a project south of town to bolster the survival of an ancient friend, the sturgeon. For decades, the Yakama Nation in Washington focused its efforts on restoring salmon in the Columbia River Basin, but now the tribe is looking to Miller to help the prehistoric fish that has been all but forgotten. Working off a shoestring budget, she acquired holding ponds, filters, plumbing, supplies, and surplus hatchery equipment to create the tribe's first sturgeon recovery program on 15 acres of Yakama Nation land along the Marion Drain. When power was extended to the site in January, Miller, who works for the tribe's fisheries department, was more than ready. "We actually had our first fish before we even had power," she quipped. Next month, her efforts will come full circle when she releases her first sturgeon, actually a few thousand, into the Priest Rapids, Wanapum, and Rocky Reach reservoirs of the Columbia River. About 40,000 sturgeon at a time can be raised at the hatchery, and the plan is to release them into various acres and areas throughout the mid-Columbia River. As the program grows, there will be releases in lower sections of the river as well, she said. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you all for joining with us today and come back tomorrow for some more. Miigwech.